Hey, it's Lauren Abrams, and I've got Maya here, and I'm going to let you introduce yourself in a minute. It's from 52 Weeks of Hope. You had such a great episode. All my friends loved you. I got
Okay.
great feedback from listeners, and it was just so much fun getting to know you. We have a mutual friend who told me I had to interview you, and when she told me about your background, Maya is the perfect example, which I talk about on the episode of the grass is always greener, and we're not going to talk about that, but I just love your whole background and your story and who you are today, which we'll start with that just for anybody who hasn't listened to the episode. It's so good and so rich. But just you want to introduce yourself and who you are, and then we'll get into like how you get to make your passion your professional life and how what's the best workout to do, and also when you don't have any time in your day, how to make health a priority.
Sure. Health and wellness is a huge part of why I'm here.
Yeah.
I teach yoga. I also run a company called Yoga Works, which used to be a giant brick and mortar yoga studio business and now has pivoted to be mostly a digital experience on the back end of COVID. And in addition to that, my background was originally in finance and corporate development. And I've been able to kind of parlay that into supporting yoga and wellness and really helping people understand that living well is such an immensely important part of just being human on the planet, and we should all make it a priority.
Yeah, definitely. I listened to somebody today. He said, we was talking about how we all want to live a life of significance, which I just thought was a great way to put it. Instead of just the rote kind of "I'm here, when am I done?" Kind of a day with a head in the sand and being an ostrich and not paying attention. So I just,
Absolutely.
yeah, I just
Yeah.
thought that was just a great way to start the day with that kind of a message.
Sure.
So
And I think it's really important for us to remember that, the things that bring us a sense of fulfillment or give us sense of purpose don't necessarily have to be the things that we do to make a living. It's
yeah,
really nice when those two things can intersect, but sometimes they're separate things. And I think it's so important for us to remember that just because you're not making money doing something, it doesn't make it less important or less fulfilling for you in your life.
yeah. Somebody gave me this. Wait, here it is. It's a pack. It's a set. I don't know. Can you see it?
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, love that.
They're cards. It says "You are magic," and each card has a saying or a thing. Um, anyway, it says here, the one that on the back of that one, it says, "Reality is not only what we see on the surface; it has a magical dimension as well. And if we so desire, it is legitimate to enhance it and color it to make our journey through life less trying."
I love
So
that.
anyway, there's a whole bunch of like sayings
There's
and
magic everywhere. That's the thing.
yeah.
We just have to look.
Yeah, just it's and so I like to say, like, let's to get back to the magic of life or find the magic in what lights you up inside. So, for anybody who's watching this, I asked Maya, what are the 3 questions that you're asked the most? And, I love the how do I translate my passion into my professional life? So
Yeah.
let's go ahead and address that one first because Maya is a teacher. She trains yoga teachers. She teaches meditation. She went from wanting nothing to do with this growing up, like at 5 years old, living in Kauai growing up. She's like, "I'm gonna grow up and live in New York and be in finance," and that is what she did until she didn't anymore, and now so anyway, but talk about how what you teach people about how to do that.
Yeah, and especially when I work with teachers in training, this is a big thing, where people are like, "Oh, I really want to be a yoga teacher," or "I really want to, do this thing that's really like been my passion project to date." And I always tell people, that's amazing. Like, what a great thing to find something that really lights you up that you want to share with other people. And the best thing to do is really to start small, right? So, how do you start to share whatever it is that you love and are passionate about with other people? Again, not maybe in a way where you're making a ton of money or it's like the only thing that sustains you from a financial perspective, but it's really making sure that you feel fulfilled, because there may come a point where, like, as you do that thing that fulfills you more and more and it becomes your work, where it's like not as magical anymore. And like I went through that personally, when I was teaching, I used to teach full time and I got like really burnt out because I was teaching like over 20 yoga classes every week. I was teaching trainings. I was like, from the perspective of social media, like everybody was like, oh my gosh, she's like a full time yoga teacher. What a dream. But when I actually thought about it, I was like, wow, like I'm burnt out. I'm giving a lot of myself and my passion just, I don't feel as passionate about anymore. So it's like always finding that balance between like doing the things that light you up and then also doing the things that you need to do to keep yourself, alive and pay your bills. And understanding that just because something pays your bills, like that's good. It doesn't mean that it has to be that thing that you're most passionate about, but it's great when you can find that intersection. But like you said, like the grass is always greener. Like I think we always feel that where we're like, oh, if only I could do this for a living, my life would be so much better. It comes with two sides.
Yeah, it definitely does. Like, I want that life, which means there's something going on with you that you're not okay with.
Exactly.
Like, it's everything is an inside job. It just always is.
It really
So
is.
how does somebody who has this passion of something they wanna do, how do they get to translate that into their professional life?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, what happened was I kind of identified what my skill sets were. And I had this background in business, I had this background in finance, and I recognized that especially in kind of the health wellness light workers realm, there aren't a ton of people that have that background or a ton
Yeah,
of people that want to do those things. So
that's
for
true.
me, it was really translating those skills into supporting this thing that I really believe in, like with yoga and meditation. Like I'm a real believer. Have used those tools in my life and they've gotten me out of really dark times. So for me, it was like, well, I know what I'm good at. I can recognize that even though these things like maybe aren't the most fun from the perspective of the outside, like I don't know many people that love Excel as much as I do. But it's like I love spreadsheets and like spreadsheets are a necessary part of a lot of businesses. So it was taking that skill set and translating it into an industry that I felt a lot of passion about. And I think for all of us, as we look at like the intersection of what we're good at and then what's needed in the industry or what's needed in the world, we can find that sweet spot where we feel really fulfilled and in support of these things that we love, but maybe it doesn't look exactly like you thought it might.
Yeah, that's a very good way to
Yeah.
put it. Okay, and then let's get to, how do you prioritize health when everyone's so busy?
Yeah. And I
And it
think this
ends up
is
like where everyone has good intentions, like,
sure.
I'm gonna work out, I'm gonna get up at 5 AM instead of 6 or 7
Right.
or whatever it is, and I'm gonna journal, I'm gonna meditate, I'm gonna work out. I'll start with 15 minutes, and then I'll work out 20, and then I'll do the 45-minute class or whatever.
Yep. Yeah, and I think you kind of got at it, right? We have to start simple. And I think sometimes what happens is we get really over ambitious, which is not a bad thing. But, you have to be realistic too, because ultimately doing something in service of your health, if you're sacrificing something else like sleep, for example, which is what a lot of us do, like I'll just get up earlier, like, I'll go to bed later, I'll squeeze it all in. But ultimately, something like sleep is super important for your own well-being and
Yeah.
self-care. So it doesn't really make sense to squeeze the sleep, but starting small. So it's like you pick one thing to add into your life. It takes like at least 21 days to form, some sort of habit. So it's like just committing to, hey, I'm going to meditate for 3 minutes a day for 21 days. And most of us that say we don't have time for these things, we're the ones that need it the most.
Yeah.
So it's really recognizing like, hey, like this is a priority, and it all comes down to prioritization. I mean, I think if your health and well-being is really a priority for you, you'll make time. But sometimes we need to learn, and that like comes in the form of something like burnout, for example, that health and wellness is a priority. And like, because we only have so much to give. So I think it's so important that we remember we have to put our own oxygen masks on first. And in putting your oxygen mask on, then you have so much more to give to everybody around you, and to all your other obligations. So it's making time for you and starting small and being consistent.
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it, and I interviewed somebody, and he says he coaches about starting that small, like, especially with exercise, like, if you do it in this huge amount, that nobody's ever gonna do it again. Like,
Absolutely. And I think this is I mean, it kinda goes to I know when we are chatting, the first question that I get asked probably the most is, "What kind of workout should I do?" Or, "What kind of practice should I do? What kind of meditation? What kind of yoga?" And I always respond by saying, "Well, what will you do?" Because that is what you should do. You should do the thing that you will do. And I think, like, I am such a huge advocate of movement and of exercise, but it doesn't have to look like getting on a treadmill and like slogging the miles out. Because for most people, that's not, it's not exciting. It doesn't bring them joy. So it's like, what is the thing that you will do? Maybe it's going for a walk outside. Maybe it's dancing around your kitchen with like your favorite music blasting. Like that is still exercise. That is still a workout. So it's like, do the things that you will do and that you will do with consistency. And then you may be inspired to do other things from there, but you have to start with like something that sparks joy. I'll steal the Marie Kondo phrase.
yeah, yeah, definitely steal that. That doesn't
Yeah.
just apply to the closet. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And how about with meditation? How do you, recommend people start that?
I think for meditation, the most, I think, challenging aspect of meditation for most people is this idea of being still because we spend so much of our day every day kind of riding the momentum of all the things that we have to get done. So when you actually sit down and get still, you're forced to confront like the stuff that maybe you've been avoiding. Uncomfortable, maybe you're feeling like your emotions, which again are just energy that move through you. Like there's no need to attach a storyline to it, but when we're sitting still in meditation, we have to experience those feelings, that energy. So, this is why I recommend that people start small. And I often recommend that people start with some sort of mindfulness based meditation. And if you're unfamiliar with like what that means, it's really an acknowledgement of what you're experiencing and then tying your attention to something that feels more tangible. Like very often people will use the breath as a mindfulness meditation practice. You notice your inhales, you notice your exhales. Another thing would be like using a mantra or a phrase so that you can attach your attention to something and then you become really aware when your attention moves off of that thing. And then it's not about judging, it's not about like, being down on yourself when you observe that kind of move away from the mantra or the breath or whatever it is, because ultimately that means you're human. That's a totally natural thing to have happen, but it's making a conscious choice to return. And that is the meditation part. It's like acknowledging, like, hey, this is this present moment awareness that I have. When my attention gets pulled away, I just know that I'm doing this human thing that we all do because I have a brain and it works and it thinks. But then I choose to come back to the present moment so that I'm not so stuck in what happened before I got here in the past. I'm not stuck on what I think will happen in the future, but I can just appreciate this moment for what it is.
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just love that. And do you have some place that you recommend somebody goes to start their meditation?
Yeah, I think, I am a huge fan of creating kind of a ritual around it. So even if it's like you carve out like a single little tiny space in your apartment or your office or whatever it is, and you say, hey, like this is the place where I'm gonna like take a moment for myself. And it's really important even just to set that intention. Because I know some of us like live in smaller spaces, work in smaller spaces. We have to be mindful of like maybe having to use spaces for multiple purposes. But it is really carving out that space for yourself and saying, hey, you know this is going to be my space. And I know a lot of people, I hear the advice all the time, like find somewhere quiet. I'm not a huge advocate of that. It can be helpful, but like ultimately the rubber hits the road when you're confronted with stimulus, right? So like even if you can't be somewhere totally quiet, that's okay. That's just going to help your practice along, because
I
you may run up against distraction and noise and all these things that are happening, and it's just an opportunity to drop a little bit deeper into your practice.
Yeah, I meditating over the weekend by a golf course, and there was
Mm,
tennis, and there was I think there was a kids camp happening. There were
yeah.
and I just tried to listen to the wind. I could hear the birds, and I was like, "Oh, listen to the different sound," and then I didn't even hear it. It
Yeah.
gets if so anyone saw, I sit in literally a corner is where I'm
Yeah.
out of a floor. I don't have, like, anything that there's nothing fancy where I've been to friends' houses where they have literal, like, it looks like an altar. I don't know what you anyway, I'm just like, "Yeah, I have my floor." I like my back against a wall, that's why. I like a flat anyway.
Yeah, no,
That's just
absolutely,
me,
and
I just
somewhere where you can be comfortable, and like the thing about meditation, and I've realized this big time. I've done a couple of kind of like 10-day silent retreats, which are super intense. But,
yeah,
I went into those being like, oh, like I do all this yoga, like my body is not a problem. I'll have no problem sitting down for extended periods of time. And like my body was the first thing that started to scream at me. It
yeah,
was like, oh my God, this is so uncomfortable. Like, why are you doing this? Everything hurts. I feel like way older than I actually am. But it is like you kind of start to unwind. So it's like making your body comfortable. And this is where some people, need to lay down to start meditating. And I think that's fine. If you fall asleep, it probably means that you're tired. It's not something to judge. But from there you can start to move on in your practice so that it becomes more about like mindful awareness and less about getting rest that your body desperately needs. But you need to start with the rest part.
yeah, yeah. I Spring
Yeah.
Washam was maybe the week after you. I don't know. She was just on her episode,
Yeah.
and it's so funny because she's been doing this for decades, and she says
Yeah.
the silent meditation. She says there's nothing silent about your mind. So when you said that, I'm like, I just laugh. She's like, there's
No.
nothing silent going on. Anyway,
No, and it's like
yeah,
I think the more quiet you get, the more you realize like, wow, like not only is there this constant narrative that's playing in my head all the time, but like especially when I'm around other stimulus, like I also have to deal with that at the same
yeah.
time. So it's just like this cacophony of like noise
I
that's happening all the time.
Yeah, it was pretty funny listening to her, so,
Yeah.
anyway. Oh, this was so great. I so appreciate seeing you again and having you come on.
Yeah.
If anybody hasn't heard Maya's episode, just go on and, to the website. All of her links are on there, and if you haven't, you're missing out. I mean, you have such a great episode, and if you have further questions, just let me know. We can come on and do this again anytime.
Super. Thank you.
Yeah.